Welcome back to the deep dive. If you or someone you know is planning that big leap from an Indian education board to a university abroad, you're probably standing at one of the most stressful intersections imaginable.
Absolutely. And it's not about the exams, is it? It's all about the paperwork.
It's all about the paperwork, the recognition, and this really crucial administrative difference between getting an acceptance letter and actually getting a visa.
And that stress, that confusion, it's almost always, and this is the sad part, it's almost always self-inflicted.
How so?
It just stems from asking the absolutely essential question far, far too late in the game. I mean, we've seen it time and time again in the sources, where all this ambition just clashes head-on with bureaucracy, all because of timing.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core question, and it sounds so simple, is just, will foreign universities accept the certificate from this board?
Right.
But the key isn't the question itself, it's when you ask it. Is it in grade 9? When you're choosing a path?
It's almost never then. It's typically asked at the point of, well, maximum vulnerability, often after the student has already gotten a phenomenal result in grade 12.
So the hard part is done, they think.
They think. And then the panic starts to bubble up, when the conditional offers are mysteriously delayed, or, and this is the ultimate nightmare scenario, when a visa is denied.
Just flat out denied.
Just denied, purely because the equivalence of that shiny educational qualification, it just can't be formally established for immigration. I mean, think about it. You've got the grades, you've got the acceptance, but the government of the country you want to go to just says, show me the paperwork, prove this is equivalent to our local standard.
That is just a staggering cost. We're talking years of planning, tens of thousands of dollars in fees, not to mention the emotional energy of a young adult.
All potentially wasted.
All because of a delayed administrative check. So our mission today is to build you, our listener, an armor kit of knowledge. We are here to separate the myth of prestige from the actual mechanism of documentation.
Because recognition in this world, it's not emotional. It's governed by strict, specific paperwork. Period.
Exactly. So if we can front load the facts, the requirements, right now, you can completely sidestep that dangerous assumption that seems to ruin so many applications.
It's the primary pitfall.
What is that assumption? Let's just debunk it right now.
It's the idea that a good reputation automatically translates into acceptance. The logic seems solid on the surface, right? This board is famous, it's nationally recognized, millions of students take it, so of course it must be recognized abroad.
It sounds reasonable.
It does, but foreign universities, especially in the UK, North America, parts of Europe, these are massive, heavily regulated institutions. They do not operate on reputation or anecdotes or, how familiar your brand is in a foreign market.
So they don't really care if a board is popular back home.
Not in the slightest. They care about standardized proof. They operate strictly on what are called formal equivalence frameworks.
Which means?
It means verification and documentation are mandatory. You might have the best grades in the world, but if the university, or more often the National Qualification Authority, can't quickly and cleanly slot your certificate into their system, your application just stalls.
So you have to be the one to provide the proof.
You must proactively provide the documentation that standardizes your own achievement.
Okay, we're starting with the absolute foundation here. Every listener needs to understand the functional difference between two words that sound like they mean the same thing: recognition and equivalence.
They sound similar, but they are worlds apart in this process.
Let's start with recognition. What does it actually achieve?
Recognition is the absolute baseline. It's binary, yes or no. It means that the foreign institution or the national authority of that country accepts that your Indian education board, be it CBSE, a state board, or IB, is a valid form of education.
So it's a green light on legitimacy.
That's all it is. They acknowledge you've completed schooling through a legitimate, government-approved system. It's just a checkbox that says this certificate isn't counterfeit.
Okay, but let's really stress what recognition is not.
Yeah.
Because this is where families get tripped up, right? They think, okay, our board is recognized, we're done.
And they are so far from done. Recognition absolutely does not guarantee admission. It doesn't mean your 90% in CBSE is weighted the same as, say, an A-level student's 3 A's in the UK.
Not even close.
Not even close. And it definitely doesn't mean you're automatically eligible for a really demanding course like aeronautical engineering. Recognition just establishes validity. It allows your paperwork to even be considered.
So it gets you through the front door?
It gets you through the door, but the real work starts the second you're inside.
Okay, so if recognition is that first door, the true power, the thing that determines if an application flies or fails, is equivalence. Explain how that works.
Equivalence is the administrative machine. It's the mechanism that decides how your qualification is interpreted, how it's weighted, and how it's valued compared to the receiving country's own standard.
Okay, give us an analogy.
Here's the key analogy for today. Recognition proves your money is real. Equivalence is the high-stakes currency exchange rate.
I love that. Equivalence is the exchange rate.
Right. You've got Indian rupees. Recognition says, yes, these are valid notes. But equivalence is what answers the hard, quantifiable questions for the university's accountant.
Like what?
Like, does this Indian Class 12 completion translate into 12 full years of formal education in the U.S.? Or maybe, because of some structural difference, is it only 11? Or does the curriculum cover the prerequisite depth in, say, calculus or advanced chemistry?
And what's the actual numerical translation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is the numerical translation of this final mark onto our GPA scale or our A-level grades? Equivalence is the translator. It assigns a precise administrative value to your education within their system.
And we know that even slight structural differences can have massive consequences.
Oh, absolutely. For instance, a university might recognize the State Board of West Bengal, that's recognition, but their equivalence framework might decide that because of the board's exam structure, or maybe the number of instruction hours, that student needs a mandatory foundation year.
A bridging program.
A bridging program to achieve academic parity with local applicants. And that foundation year costs time, and it costs a lot of money. That is equivalence in action. It sets the terms of engagement.
Now, this is where the confusion really peaks for parents. They often rely on advice from their kid's school or maybe some alumni or education consultants. We need to be crystal clear about who actually holds the keys, who makes these equivalence decisions.
The sources are very, very clear on who is not the final authority. It's not the school principal, it's not your local counselor, and it is definitely not the aggressive agent who promises you easy admission.
So who are the real players?
The actual decision makers are far more formal, bureaucratic, and highly specialized.
So let's list them so listeners know whose website they should actually be checking.
Okay, first you have the universities themselves. Specifically, their international admissions departments. They often have their own internal matrices for this stuff, but even they often defer to the second player.
And that would be?
The national qualification authorities in the destination country. These are the bodies that set the countrywide standard. Think of UCAS or the INEC centers in the UK. They provide official statements of comparability.
So they set the benchmark, the exchange rate for the whole country.
They do. And then there's a third player, which we hear about a lot, especially for North America.
Right, the credential evaluation agencies.
Exactly. These are independent third-party organizations that exist solely to analyze foreign diplomas and translate them into the host country's academic language. The most famous is probably WES, World Education Services.
Admirable, yeah.
They basically take the burden of translation off the university. But the crucial thing to remember is that because these are all independent and nationally focused, each country, and sometimes even each professional field like medicine or engineering, applies its own specific framework.
That's a key distinction. What works for a Canadian university through WES might be totally irrelevant for a German university which has its own system.
Exactly. And that leads us right to what we're calling the parent blind spot.
The sources of bad information.
Right. Parents are looking at these colorful school brochures. They're relying on alumni stories from 5 years ago. They're consuming marketing claims. What are they actively ignoring? What's in the fine print that they're missing?
They're ignoring the documents that actually detail the administrative machinery.
They're ignoring the official recognition lists from those national authorities we just mentioned. They skip the admission fine print on the university website that details specific subject requirements. Not just grades, but which subjects, at what level.
The nitty-gritty.
The nitty-gritty. And crucially, they ignore the country-specific rules that govern equivalence. That's the stuff that can dictate mandatory third-party evaluations or entrance testing.
So they're treating a high-stakes international regulatory process like it's local school gossip.
That's a perfect way to put it. That disconnect between the assumed reputation and the mandatory fine print is the starting point for pretty much every application disaster. A parent will say, my friend's child got into Australia with a state board diploma, but they don't ask the follow-up questions.
Like what?
Like, Did they have to pay hundreds of dollars for a specific agency to validate every single transcript? Did that student need an extra bridging program? Did they miss a deadline because the evaluation took 2 months longer than they expected?
That's the administrative cost.
That is the administrative cost of the process, and that's the part that is never advertised.
Okay, let's start applying this framework to the boards, beginning with the big one, the Central Board of Secondary Education, or CBSE. It's a national giant. Its status is pretty well established. How is CBSE Class 12 officially recognized?
Nationally, of course, CBSE is the standard bearer. Internationally, the source material confirms it enjoys recognition by the vast majority of foreign universities. This is that baseline acceptance we talked
So
about.
they know the name, they know the system.
They know the name, they accept its validity. But, as we've learned, acceptance does not mean automatic equivalence. And this is where we have to introduce an essential administrative body for CBSE students, the Association of Indian Universities, or AIU.
Right. So what is the AIU's role inside India, and why does this paperwork suddenly become so critical for foreign admissions?
Domestically, AIU is all about quality control, standardization. It makes sure degrees from different Indian universities are mutually recognized within India. But when you look outward, its role becomes instrumental.
Yeah.
It acts as a formal, recognized Indian government body that can certify the qualification structure for a foreign audience. It's that official stamp.
And what specific role does that stamp play for, say, a university in Germany?
The AIU provides a formal bridge in 3 critical areas. First, for higher education recognition, it can formally vouch for the structure of the CBSE curriculum. Second, its letters are often mandatory for visa processing, where immigration needs that confirmation from a recognized Indian body.
And third,
And third, and most practically, the AIU provides those essential formal equivalence letters that universities might ask for if they don't want to spend their own resources evaluating the transcript.
so where do we see these requests for AIU confirmation most often? It's not every country, right?
That's right. The sources point to specific regions and even course types. We see it a lot in continental Europe, especially in Germany, also in parts of Asia like Singapore or the Gulf states. And critically, it's often demanded for students applying to highly structured professional courses.
Like medicine, engineering.
Exactly. Medicine, dentistry, engineering, law, fields with very rigid entry requirements.
And why is it so important in those specific cases? What are they looking for?
Because it confirms 2 things that those foreign bodies scrutinize with, almost forensic intensity. First, the confirmation of 12 years of formal schooling. Many European systems are extremely rigid about counting the years. The AIU letter standardizes that.
And the second,
The second, and this is vital for professional courses, is subject-level validation. The AIU can certify that the rigor and depth of the subjects you took, say physics, meet a specific minimum threshold of instructional hours that they require.
so if a German university needs proof that an applicant had 1,500 hours of high school science, the AIU letter is the easiest piece of paper to confirm that.
Precisely. It lets the admissions officer just check a box. It saves them so much work. And we have to hammer this point home, AIU equivalence enables eligibility. It is not an admission guarantee.
It just proves you meet the basic structural requirements. Okay, let's pivot a little. CBSE itself is changing, right? The National Education Policy, or NEP, is pushing competency-based learning. How have these changes affected how foreign universities evaluate CBSE students?
The shift is profound, really. CBSE is moving away from rote memorization towards application and competency. Academically, this is fantastic, but administratively, it changes the evaluation calculus for foreign institutions.
They're not just looking at a single final exam score anymore.
No, not at all. Marks alone, the sources stress, are rapidly becoming insufficient proof of suitability.
So what are they looking at now? What are the key components beyond that final percentage?
They're looking at 3 things to understand a student's true competency. First, their subject combinations. Are they rigorous? Do they meet the course prerequisites? Second, their marks trend.
So not just the final exam.
No, they're looking at scores from grade 10, grade 11, pre-boards. They want to see consistent effort, not just a last-minute spike.
And the third component is fascinating. The school profile. Why does the individual school matter so much if the board itself is standardized?
Because of that competency shift. When the board emphasizes internal assessments and applied knowledge, the rigor of the specific school becomes a really relevant quality indicator. The university wants to know that the competency-based learning was delivered effectively.
So they're checking up on the school.
They are. They're looking at the school's infrastructure, teacher qualifications, its track record with international placements. The school profile gives context. It helps them trust the grades.
Wait, so an admissions officer is basically saying, I recognize CBSE, but I'm going to do a deep dive into your specific school's reputation to make sure these internal grades are trustworthy.
That's exactly what they're saying. It introduces a huge layer of nuance. It makes the students' consistent work over 4 years much more visible, for better or worse.
So where does CBSE face specific friction points abroad? Not rejection, but what are these challenges in what you call the alignment adjustment process?
The challenge is always about standardizing the unknown. The friction points often happen when universities, particularly in countries with heavily regulated technical fields, question the subject depth.
Especially in STEM.
Especially concerning STEM labs. Many foreign engineering programs have very specific mandated hours for practical lab work, and it's often documented separately. A CBSE transcript might need extra proof to meet that expectation for the hands-on component.
So they're not rejecting the physics score, they're just asking for more detail on the methodology.
Precisely, the depth of instruction. And because of this need for clarity, some universities might just proactively impose a foundation year.
And that's not a punishment.
Not at all. It's a mandatory bridging program. It's designed to standardize the students' preparation, to fill any potential gaps before they start the core degree. It's a common part of the process, and it needs to be budgeted for.
So what's the final reality check for a CBSE student and their parents?
The conclusion is overwhelmingly positive. I mean, CBSE is widely accepted, it's known, it's rarely rejected outright. It's a known quantity. But success requires rigorous early planning. You have to verify subject eligibility early, long before the grade 12 results are out, and you have to meticulously prepare all the secondary documentation, anticipating requests for AIU certification or syllabus breakdowns.
The key is just avoiding that last-minute scramble.
Yes. Avoid the last-minute equivalence panic. CBSE works globally, but only if you respect the administrative demands of the foreign system and you plan ahead.
Okay. Moving on to state boards. This is where it gets interesting, because these boards educate the vast majority of students in India, and the variability between them is just immense.
It's huge. Curriculum, exam style, grading. It's all different from state to state.
So for a foreign admissions officer thousands of miles away, what is the recognition reality when they get a state board certificate?
Well, the fundamental reality is that state boards are nationally valid and recognized. That's not the issue. But when they cross international borders, that high variability becomes a major administrative headache for the university.
They lack that immediate standardization of CBSE or IB.
Exactly. So the initial question from the university changes. Instead of just asking, is this valid? Like they might with CBSE. Their primary question is different.
What do they ask?
The question immediately becomes, how does this compare to our national standard? And how on earth do we quantify the academic rigor? I mean, they're dealing with potentially 30 different boards, all with different structures. They just can't use a single framework.
They need an independent translator.
They absolutely do, and that immediately translates into a dramatically higher documentation and equivalence requirement for the student.
So what are those specific additional administrative steps that state board students often have to take?
They face some significant additional burdens, and parents really need to be aware of these and budget for them. We see 4 common ones. First, mandatory credential evaluation through an agency like WES for North America or INIC for the UK.
Okay, let's pause on WES for a second. That's the big one for North America. What does that process actually involve, and what's the timeline?
WES is a crucial technical barrier. They require official documents sealed and signed by the Controller of Examinations. This is not a photocopy from your school.
So you have to go back to the board itself.
You have to go back to the board, and the board often has to send the documents directly to WES. The student can't even touch them. Now, WES itself might process the evaluation in a week or 2, but getting those documents from the Indian board,
How long did that take?
it can easily take 2 to 3 months. And if you start late, that can cause major application delays. The delay is in the retrieval of the documents, not the evaluation itself.
Right, so what's the second requirement?
The second is needing specific equivalence certificates that might require more detailed documentation, like course outlines and instructional hours, often beyond what the AIU even provides. Third, they might be asked to take additional testing.
National entrance exams.
Yes, precisely because the university lacks confidence in the comparability of the board exam alone. And the fourth, which affects costs and time a lot,
The foundation programs.
the much higher likelihood of mandatory foundation programs or bridging courses. If the foreign system can't easily map the state board curriculum, they protect their own academic integrity by making the students spend a year catching up.
Now, you said these requirements are not discriminatory, but I have to push back on that a little. For a student from a rural state board school, doesn't the cost of WES, the complexity of getting sealed documents from a slow government board, the time lost in a foundation year, doesn't that become a functional barrier to entry?
That's a crucial distinction, and the sources do support this view. Administratively, the requirements are for standardization, not exclusion. But practically, yes, the documentation burden acts as a massive functional barrier.
It adds cost, complexity.
And it demands a level of administrative literacy and proactiveness that a family new to this might simply not have. The university isn't saying, we hate state boards. They're just saying, we require evidence that costs time and money to produce.
And if you can't produce it, you're effectively excluded.
You are, which makes the early planning mandate for these students absolutely critical.
So what are the required advanced steps for these families? What should they be doing years ahead?
First and foremost, they must shortlist their target countries early. By grade 10, really. The requirements for Australia might be completely different from Singapore, so lock down 2 or 3 countries.
And then?
Then immediately identify the required equivalence agencies for those countries and figure out the document submission process. That means calling the board office, finding out the fees, the lead times for sending authenticated transcripts.
And get that info more than a year before the deadline.
Well, over a year. Third, they need to factor in all the English proficiency requirements like IELTS or TOEFL. Those scores become even more critical as a baseline proof of readiness.
And finally, how do they bolster their actual academic profile when the certificate itself is under more scrutiny?
They have to work diligently to build strong academic context alongside their marks. This means robust portfolios, project documentation, detailed reference letters that really build their academic narrative and prove rigor.
So the state board pathway is viable.
It is entirely viable, but it demands far earlier clarity and, frankly, aggressive, proactive engagement with the bureaucracy. All that panic and board switching in grade 11 is completely avoidable if you just confront the administrative reality in grade 9 or 10.
All right, let's shift gears now to the International Baccalaureate, or IB. This is generally seen as the gold standard for global academic mobility. It often simplifies this whole administrative maze we've been talking about.
It really does.
So why? Why does the IB diploma make eligibility checks so much easier for foreign universities?
Well, the IB was literally designed for this purpose. It's a triumph of standardization across borders. It's globally standardized. The curriculum, the assessment, the core components like theory of knowledge and the extended essay, it's all uniform, whether the school is in India or Indiana.
So it's widely understood.
It's widely understood by admissions officers, and critically, it is benchmarked across countries and universities.
Meaning an admissions officer in, say, the Netherlands or Canada sees an IB transcript, and they don't need to call WES or the AIU. They know exactly what those numbers mean instantly.
That's the core administrative advantage right there. The structure provides instant, quantifiable academic comparability that no national board can really match. It just streamlines the whole eligibility check process.
But even with that streamlined process, IB students are still competing like mad for top spots. So how do universities interpret the IB diploma beyond just the final score?
The total score is sort of the price tag, but the university always looks under the hood. They use 4 key factors. First, they deeply scrutinize the subject level, differentiating very clearly between higher level HL and standard level SL subjects.
HL being the main evidence of specialization.
Exactly, similar to A levels. It shows their readiness for highly academic courses. Second, they rely very heavily on predicted grades submitted by the school.
And those often form the basis of a conditional offer.
They do. If the school predicts a 42, the university might give a conditional offer of 40. And if the student misses that condition, the offer is withdrawn.
Simple as that?
Simple as that. Third, they look at the internal assessment quality, the quality of the work submitted over the 2 years, not just the final exam. This proves sustained performance.
Right. And the fourth?
The fourth is performance in the core components, like the extended essay, which gives them evidence of independent research skills. It's a very holistic view.
Which confirms they're judging on 2 years of performance, not just a 3-hour exam. But let's challenge the perception, the myth of the automatic advantage. A lot of parents see IB as a golden ticket.
It's a very common misconception.
So what does the IB not do?
It simplifies the logistics for sure, but it does not eliminate competition. It does not guarantee admission, especially at a university with a 5% acceptance rate. It doesn't let the student bypass the intense competition from other high-achieving IB, A-level, or American high school kids.
And it doesn't replace the rest of the profile.
Not at all. It doesn't replace the overall strength of the student's personal profile, their extracurriculars, their essays, their references. And here's the harsh truth.
The reality check.
The crucial detail is that a weak IB student who scores poorly or who fails to meet the specific prerequisite subject requirements gets rejected just as quickly as a weak student from any other board. The prestige of the board is irrelevant if the scores don't align.
They're looking for academic suitability, period.
Above all else.
But even with this strong global recognition, are there any limits? Are there situations where IB still faces administrative scrutiny?
Yes. Recognition is powerful, but it's not absolute. Admissions officers still have the right to impose their own specific requirements.
Especially for certain programs.
Especially for highly specific, capacity-controlled programs. Some universities will still require specific HL subjects. A computer science degree might demand a 7 in HL math, for example. Others demand minimum subject scores in certain areas, even if the overall diploma score is high.
So you can have a 43 overall, but if you only got a 5 in HL chemistry, you might still be ineligible for a competitive pharmacy course.
Exactly. The overall acceptance isn't the whole story. The equivalence of the parts of the diploma matters. And in some countries, local regulatory bodies might still impose national entrance tests for fields like medicine and law.
So the IB alone isn't enough for licensure.
Correct. The core conclusion here is that IB recognition provides unparalleled clarity and comparability, but it absolutely does not override essential localized course prerequisites.
Okay, so the final reality check on the IB pathway. What are the benefits and what are the demands?
The benefits are clear: clarity, comparability, and a dramatically smoother administrative evaluation process. But the demands are high. It requires sustained performance over 2 full years, highly disciplined documentation of all your internal assessments, and frankly, realistic expectations about the intense global competition.
So recognition is a powerful tool.
It's a powerful administrative tool for the student, but it is fundamentally just that, a tool. It's not an entitlement.
We have spent this deep dive dissecting the administrative maze of CBSE, state boards, and IB. We try to separate reputation from the documentation that's required for genuine equivalence. Now let's synthesize all of this into the recognition checklist.
This is it. These are the 5 non-negotiable questions every parent and student has to ask before choosing a board, and certainly before submitting a single application.
This is your defense mechanism against that late verification anxiety.
It is. Treat this as your first, most important academic requirement.
Okay, question 1. Is the board recognized in my target countries? And don't rely on rumors or school marketing. Check the official admission pages of the universities you're targeting.
Question 2. Is equivalence required, and if so, by whom? Does the university accept the transcript as is, or does it have to go through an agency like ENIC-NARIC or WES? You need the name of the agency, the exact documents they need, and their realistic turnaround time.
Question 3. Are my chosen subject combinations eligible for the course I want? This is so critical. If you're applying for engineering in the UK, do you have HL math and physics at the required level? A great overall score is useless if the prerequisites aren't met.
Question 4. Is additional testing necessary even with a strong diploma? Even high-scoring IB or CBSE students might need to take an S&T, an ACT, or other national entrance exams depending on the country and the course. Verify this early.
And the final, most crucial question, which is all about the paperwork timeline. Do I possess verifiable, official documentation and not just assumptions? This means authenticated transcripts, official AIU letters, agency-verified reports.
Paperwork over prestige, every single time. If you look back at the root cause of every visa denial, every stalled application we've talked about today, it all boils down to one simple failure: late verification.
If you verify these 5 points 3 years out,
You remove the fear. You remove the cost.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, the parent, the student? Our final synthesis is really about empowerment through preparation.
It is. It's about turning a potential disaster into just a manageable process. It means that foreign universities don't suddenly reject students out of spite or because they dislike your board. They reject incomplete or uncontextualized paperwork.
Parents simply discover the administrative requirements too late.
Way too late. The system is guided entirely by documentation, preparation, and process, not by the assumed prestige or popularity of your board back in India.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you today. Think about this. The greatest initial barrier to entry into the world's most competitive foreign universities is rarely academic difficulty. It's usually administrative unpreparedness.
In this process, the paperwork is the first and often the most challenging exam you must pass.
Plan calmly, verify early, and let the facts of the bureaucratic process guide your decisions.
Not fear, not rumor, and certainly not delayed documentation. That is the only way to navigate this landscape successfully.
A huge thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this administrative roadmap gives you the confidence to prepare effectively. We'll see you next time.